you've had some really great publicity about this and some great interviews. I think a lot of writers have done a really good job with it. But one thing that really struck me was when you said and this kind of relates to the title, The Nature of Not Knowing, because sometimes when I start to write something, I don't really know where it's going. You know, when we're taught writing early on, make an outline, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, that worked okay when you were in college or when you were in high school English. But for the kind of writing that I do, it doesn't really work because I like to discover what I'm writing about as I write. And you kind of said the same thing. Didn't you say the same thing in one of your interviews? That you don't really know where a painting is going?
Yes.
How does that work?
It's a way of working, actually, and I think it relates to writing as well, where you set the stage for something to happen, but you're not prescribing it.
Does it make you nervous?
It makes me excited.
It's kind of a fine line.
It's kind of a fine line. And then you might end up in a territory where you really don't know, and you really are sort of confused about the direction of the piece, or say the painting, where it's going. And sometimes that means you need to sit back and take a little reflection on it. I usually take a nap.
I take a nap. I like that idea. But no, I kind of write on deadline, so I don't always have that luxury. But has it ever happened to you that you've got something going on canvas, but it is not working, and then you realize you have to just start from the beginning?
Obliteration.
Obliterate it? Everything you've got, even though there's a nice part that you like?
You can hang on that cliff for a long time. You've got a precious component in a painting or an area that really is beautiful. The rest of the painting does not work in relationship to it, or you're holding this area as precious and this area can't develop. So it takes a brave step to kind of interrupt that and obliterate it.
Because you're kind of in love with a certain part of it, but it's not going where you want it to go?
Well, and by opening it up and shifting it and changing it and moving it into another meaning, it opens up the whole piece. It's almost like it's a relief, it's a freedom once you let go of something that you're holding too precious. I mean, that's how it is in painting. And that can be a sentence in writing or an idea.
Well, you write something and just think it's kind of brilliant, but it's not leading anywhere. And then the way we write now on computers, you just delete it.
Right.
And, when I first started writing, I would save these sentences, save them, put them down below, or copy and paste them somewhere else. But now I just get rid of it. And that is scary.
It is scary. Let's plaster the wall with those sentences. That would be so much fun. I'd like to read them.
They're probably not that brilliant anyway. We just thought they were brilliant at the moment.
Right.
But if it's not, it's got to lead somewhere.
Yeah, it's got to lead somewhere.
I mean, and that's how the whole piece, in my case, like a 900-piece word piece, that's how it all happens. But with a painting, it just seems so monumental.
Well, it's everything. But I think writing's everything, too. It can go in all kinds of directions. Mm-hmm. I mean, with a painting, you've got the physical definition of the size of the painting. And in writing, I mean, you've got your 900 word format, which is, I mean, I don't know how to translate that in terms of painting, but I would see it like the size, sets up the stage. Like this piece is the verticalness of these pieces
so
set up
sometimes
the
you
stage.
think, it should be a horizontal?
Well, then you just flip it.
You just flip it.
Turn it upside down.
Has that happened to you?
Yeah.
And do you ever turn it upside down?
Oh, well, all the time.
All the time?
It's that classic thing you do in early drawing classes where you take an image and you're asked to copy the image, but you turn the image upside down, like a photograph of a person or a landscape or something. And you turn it upside down, and you find that in drawing it upside down, your brain does not identify the subject.
Interesting.
As readily as it does when it's right side up, because being there it is, it's a person or a tree.
So what about color? Do you start off with certain ideas of, oh, you want an indigo variation of it, or does that come, or when you're doing it, you think, oh, I need a splash of red?
Colors, for me, the indigo is one thing because it's a choice to use a monochromatic color because of the power of it. And I'm really engaged with how it resonates, how deep the color is. But in painting, when I'm not using a monochromatic painting, it's like there's a voice that says, you need cobalt blue here. You need a cadmium red light. It's like the voice says, okay, put it down. You need it. You need it. You need it here. So it's some sort of external direction that asks me to engage a color that I think that I collect palettes in my head. So if I start on a basic, I'm rambling.
Well, that's what you do when you paint.
Yeah,
You're
ramble.
You're rambling, trying to find where it's going.
But I try to create palettes before I start. I'll create a whole palette. And it's really based on selecting one color initially. It may be a burnt sienna. So if I pick a burnt sienna, I'll just walk up. I've got this huge, table full of paint, and I'll walk up. And if I want to start a painting, I'll select one color, burnt sienna. Then I build relationship around that. And burnt sienna always asks for cadmium red light.
It asks.
It asks for it. It says, I want to be.
It just demands it.
Right. It's like, if you're going to use me, you need to use cadmium red light to go with me. So.
Well, so that comes from experience.
It does, yeah.
From many, many years of
Yeah.
painting and mixing and seeing things together. I think with painting, it's about colors and it's about shape and design. And
Yeah, but all that comes from, if you work like I do, which is sort of about infusion, that I spend a lot of time paying attention to details. I like to look at things closely, but I also like to look at relationships.
But you're not looking at something, you're not doing representational painting.
No, I think that when I say infusion, that's an interesting word. I really like paying attention to things, and I'm looking for relationships, and I'm looking for transitions. If you take these paintings, all this stuff is happening on the internal part of these suggested forms.
Yes.
And
These are suggested forms.
they're suggested forms, yeah.
Were you thinking of a form when you?
I was thinking that they would be suggestive.
That's so vague. Suggestive of what?
I wanted them to be a sort of abstracted figure, but not with any. I wanted them to be carved out of the paper, and all the emotional quality happening internally, and that was the idea behind these pieces. And with them being, I see these bottom squares as being plinths or supports, and I wanted these figures to hover above the supports.
Well, they do.
And they do, yeah. To some good effect, I think. If you put your finger up just across the white line that divides it, you can see what that would look like if they became one unit. And it becomes a more monumental sculptural piece that way, and this aerates it.
You like to be in front of the marsh out there. You like to be in front of the tides.
I like to be immersed in the landscape. I like being in the forest.
Yeah, but yet you're in your studio.
Yeah, but if you look at this painting over here, in a way, that's about the sort of activity of being in a deep landscape that hovers and goes over you. And it's more related to the marsh and the energy of the marsh, but it's this overall kind of patterning and drawing to me is about being immersed in landscape. Mm-hmm. And in Ossabaw, it's the forest that captivates
Well, for instance,
me.
this painting, how long did it take you to paint that?
A couple of days.
A couple days.
Started with underpainting and really kind of random marks. Select the palette first because I knew I wanted to use indigo. And I wanted the painting to have a suggestion of that light after the storm, which is a yellow, intense glow that we all know after a storm that alters the way everything looks. And then the blues, the indigos, and the lighter blue and the white. So that palette was just sort of set up initially. And then it's just random marks. It's like energy fields. And then I anchor on something and work it. But I like to work the whole canvas at the same time. I like to work all over the canvas.
And do you know when it's done?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so if you stop too early, it keeps telling you that I'm not finished.
And do you overpaint it sometimes?
Rarely.
Rarely, okay. So the key is to really stop.
The key is to really stop. And the key is to take it through its completion in the act of making. For me, that's I see it as choreography in dance. And I want the act to be complete. And I have to have a block of time in my studio. I may have several things going on in different stations in my studio, but I want to have a block of time where I can approach the painting, create the palette, make the initial marks, and then just jump in there in a sustained way until it's done. And then maybe take a nap.
So what about paintings like those over there? Those
are, I consider those drawings, even though they are painted. And they're isolated by the back, by the black background.
Do you put the black down first?
Yeah, it's a jet black gesso. And the gouache, it's a white gouache and it has a medium in it, so it has a real translucency to it. Gouache is pretty opaque. But the opaqueness in the medium makes for that kind of luminosity on top of the black. These were the precursor to the black and white paintings downstairs.
Those big ones?
The big ones. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So once I did a whole series of these, and I thought I want to try this larger with I just so canvas is black
And did something in particular motivate you to do this? A cloud? A storm at Ossabaw?
That looks sort of like a cloud, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In a way. No, I think it's the perceptual quality of it. I like black and white anyway. I love black and white photography. And I have a pretty good drawing practice, but I just like the way this white looked on that black, and I wanted to take it further. And I'd still like to take it further.
Well, I really like these kind of standalone beasties. Betsy Beast. What do you call it?
Betsy Beasts.
Betsy Beasts. What was the origin of what's the origin of that? How did that come about?
The origin is a scrap piece of plywood in my studio.
Good. I like it.
Complementary to the nature of not knowing. I found it was actually this piece was the first one. And I had used a piece of plywood to, wipe my brush off or do something, and it built up a certain character, and I kept looking at it, and I thought,
wow, so it's an accidental...
it's an accidental image.
Happening, yeah.
It's like It's like seeing Jesus in your toast.
Exactly. So you had a piece of plywood. You're wiping your brush off, and how did you see was there a shape? Had you already?
I saw the face, and I like the fact that this was dark at the top and this was light at the bottom. So I saw this face. I wasn't sure what the edging was going to be, but I knew it was going to be a head and a torso. I'm always interested in confrontation or frontal heads and imagery. There's a lot in this show. And I like the cutting off of the form right here, be it male or female.
Right.
Right.
Very unisex.
There's that. Yeah. And the Betsy Beast, I just think that, I think about women's power and women's fierceness and their strengths. And I wanted to, once I did this piece with a jigsaw, I cut it out with a jigsaw, and I thought it had power. And I wanted to do more talking about this sort of beast within. I mean, women are so capable, but often I don't think they recognize their fierceness and we see it a lot. We see it in sports, we see it women protecting their children, we see it in inter relationships. But I think our fierceness is our power, and I was raised Southern, so it's a recognition of something in part of me that I like to amplify, because I was raised not to say anything critical about anybody, or not to show any of my fierceness or my anger, so it's a bit of a exorcism.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they're not that fierce, really. They're but they're curious.
They're curious.
And they're odd, and
they're so original. I mean, I don't know any. They're just very original pieces of art.
These cutouts here came after the Betsy Beast, and they're not figurative, but they're suggestive of some sort of organic form, perhaps. This one over here maybe is a little more female in feel, but I think all my work's very female in feel.
Very female.
Yeah. I don't.
Well, I mean, the curves.
Curves.
The shape of them. There really are no right angles.
Not really a right angle.
No,
yeah,
not really.
The right angle is the format, the shape of the paper and the canvas.
Was this a jigsaw?
Yeah.
When you take your jigsaw to it, do you know what you're going to do?
No.
Yep. And do you make mistakes often?
Yeah, I had one piece I cut in half and I didn't mean to. I cut a whole section off of it because I was so into it. I was just cutting and then wham, something falls off of the side. It's like,
whoops.
But what's fun about doing the cutouts is painting them first so that it has a complete image. It's a rectangle or a square, usually a rectangle. And then I go into it with a jigsaw, and invariably I'll make one cut, and it interrupts the whole nature of the piece. It's no longer what it was, it becomes something else with that one cut.
Nature of not knowing.
Yeah, so nature of not knowing. So one cut will dramatically change everything, and that's the lead-in to what the final version will be. The cutting has begun to be a sort of thread throughout all my work, cutting the National Geographics, making the cutouts larger, cutting the paper, like these pieces over here, the two in the center are shredded Yupo paper, which is laminate, and that can carve with wood carving tools. The top paint that I put down and the top layer of the paper. And that was all by accident.
By accident.
And discovering it by accident. And I remember distinctly, I was working on some Yupo paper, which is really a beautiful, clear, flat media receptive paper. And a lot of artists are using it to good effect. And I can remember working on something and having a blob of paint on it, and I took a razor blade to
try to remove it.
Try to remove it.
And in the process,
lifted that layer underneath the paint, and still there was a layer left. And it was striking how visually exciting that was. So I just went ahead and razor bladed the whole piece. That was about 10 years ago when those started.
Well, talk about how your idea for the show for even presenting it, because you had all that. You had that laid out, didn't you?
In my head.
In your head.
Yeah. Well, actually, more than that. I mean, I did have diagrams for the floor plans, and I thought about it sort of incessantly, about what would go where. But I didn't come over here and look at the space until Susan suggested bringing one of the cutouts to go in the mirror room to see if it actually was going to work in the mirror room.
And how you would hang it.
And I held on to the last minute to do that. So that was like 2 weeks before the show opened. I think Pop went up there and we all went, okay, it's going to work. But I didn't know that.
But the challenge of hanging it on a mirror, of attaching it?
Is actually successful because the backs of the cutouts are painted, so that reflects in the mirrors. So that was the original idea behind putting those cutouts on the mirror where the backs were painted, reflected in the mirror, and the black is black, which was the antithesis to the reflection and light of the mirror room. So that
it works really well up there.
It works well, yeah. So my ideas just completely fell apart once we got the work here. I mean, I had seen it so differently. But the space, like in painting, it asks for certain pieces to go on certain walls. And you want to create a sort of continuity of meaning with what sits next to what. So initially we put the we had several things downstairs when you first walk in the door to the lobby. And Susan had a preference, and I had a preference, but none of those worked enough to be a significant entrance. And when we put the black and white pieces that were based off the gouache pieces on that wall, I knew that the two of the cutouts should come down and join them, the black cutouts. And they have this beautiful color on the back of a fluorescing green or yellow on the back of it. And once they're on a white wall, there's a radiant aura around them. That color, reverberates around the piece. We all are in discovery, and we all are in exploration, and that doesn't stop at childhood. We continue it as adults, and everybody wants to be creative.
Yeah, I guess people are afraid, though.
Yeah.
Well, you're afraid. You're afraid sometimes.
Yeah.
That it's not going to match up to what you want it to be.
Yeah, or
what it
match
should
up to
be.
expectations.
Expectations. I mean, but nobody tells you to paint something like this.
No.
There's, it's something that has to just come from you.
Yeah.
After doing it many, 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 many days.
And that's the discovery. I mean, it's a lifelong pursuit to sort of understand yourself. And, I would say to young artists, really pay attention to what you care about. Let that feed into your work, if you like animals, or if you like landscape, or if you like
indigo,
bring it all in. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Betsy.